Dona Maria I, December 17, 1734, March 20, 1816, was Queen of Portugal from February 24, 1777 until her death in 1816. Known as Maria the Pious in Portugal and Maria the Mad in Brazil. She was the first undisputed queen regnant of Portugal and the first monarch of Brazil. Maria was the eldest daughter of King Dom José I, Joseph I, of Portugal and Infanta Dona Maria Victoria of Spain. As the heir to the throne, she held the titles of Princess of Brazil and Duchess of Braganza. She married her uncle Infante Dom Pedro, Peter, in 1760. They had 6 children, of whom 3 survived infancy: Dom José, Joseph, Prince of Brazil, King Dom João VI John VI, of Portugal, and Infanta Maria Victoria. The death of King José in 1777 placed Maria, then 42 years old, on the throne. Her husband Pedro was nominally king alongside her as Dom Pedro III. Upon ascending the throne, Maria dismissed her father's powerful chief minister, Sebastião José de Carvalho e Melo, 1st Marquess of Pombal. The early part of Maria's reign witnessed growth in Portugal's economy. Maria had a number of national buildings constructed and renovated, leading to the completion of the Palace of Caluche and the inauguration of the Palace of Ajuda and other new monuments. The death of her husband in 1786, followed by the deaths in 1788 of her eldest son José and her confessor Inácio de São Caetano, caused the queen to develop clinical depression. Her second son, João, then served as Prince Regent. With Napoleon's European conquests, Maria and her court moved to the Portuguese colony of Brazil in 1807. After Brazil was elevated to a kingdom in 1815, Maria became Queen of the United Kingdom of Portugal, Brazil and the Algarves. Upon her death in 1816, her son succeeded her as King Dom João VI. Maria was born at the Ribeira Palace in Lisbon and baptized Maria Francisca Isabel Josefa Antonia Gertrudes Rita Joanna. She was the eldest of 4 daughters born to Dom José, Joseph, Prince of Brazil, later King Dom José I of Portugal, and Infanta Maria Victoria of Spain. Her father José was the son of the reigning King Dom João V, John V, of Portugal and his wife Maria Anna of Austria. Her mother, Maria Victoria, was the eldest daughter of King Don Felipe V, Philip V, of Spain and Queen Elizabeth Farnese. King João appointed his granddaughter Maria as the Princess of Beira on the day of her birth. Maria's grandfather João V died on July 31, 1750. Her father, Prince José, then succeeded to the throne as Dom José I. As José's eldest child, Maria became his heir presumptive and was given the traditional titles of Princess of Brazil and Duchess of Braganza. Influence of the Marquess of Pombal. King José's government was dominated completely by Sebastião José de Carvalho e Melo, 1st Marquess of Pombal. The king would often retire to the Palace of Caluche, which he later gave to his daughter, Princess Maria, and his brother and son-in-law, Infante Pedro, Peter. The Marquess of Pombal secured control of the government after the 1755 Lisbon earthquake, in which around 100,000 people lost their lives. The palace of Maria's birth was also destroyed in the disaster. After the earthquake, King José was often uncomfortable at the thought of staying in enclosed spaces, and later experienced claustrophobia. The king had a palace built in Ajuda, away from the city center. This palace became known as Real Barraca de Ajuda, Royal Hut at Ajuda, because it was made of wood. The family spent much time at the large palace. The palace was the birthplace of Maria's first child, José. In 1794 the palace burned to the ground and the Palace of Ajuda was built in its place. On June 6, 1760 Maria married the king's younger brother, her uncle Pedro, later King Dom Pedro III of Portugal. Maria and Pedro had 6 children, José, João Francisco, João, later King Dom João VI, Maria Victoria, Maria Clementina, and Maria I stable. Only Jose, João, and Mariana Vittoria survived to adulthood. Maria also delivered a stillborn boy in 1762. Reign? King Jose died on February 24, 1777. His daughter, Maria, then became the first undisputed queen regnant of Portugal. With Maria's accession, her husband became nominal king as Dom Pedro Thrd, but the actual regal authority was vested solely in Maria, as she was the lineal heir of the crown. Also, as Pedro's kingship was jure uxoris only, his reign would cease in the event of Maria's death, and the crown would pass to Maria's descendants. However, Pedro predeceased his wife in 1786. Maria first considered to have been a good ruler in the period prior to her madness. Her first act as queen was to dismiss the popular Secretary of State of the kingdom, the Marquis of Pombal, who had broken the power of the reactionary aristocracy via the Tavora affair, partially because of his Enlightenment, anti-Jesuit policies. Noteworthy events of this period include Portugal's membership in the League of Armed Neutrality, July 1782, and the 1781 cession of Delagoa Bay from Austria to Portugal. 3. However, the Queen had religious mania and melancholia, and this would take a toll on her health. This acute mental illness, perhaps due to porphyria, made her incapable of handling state affairs after 1792. On January 5, 1785, the Queen issued a charter imposing heavy restrictions on industrial activity in Brazil. How, for example, it prohibited the manufacture of fabrics and other products, extinguishing all textile manufactures in the colony, except the industry of coarse cloth for the use of slaves and workers, since the Portuguese colonial administration did not look favorably on the development of industrial activities in Brazil for fear of economic and, perhaps, political independence. During her reign, the trial, conviction and execution of Ensign Joaquim José da Silva Xavier, known as Tiradentes, took place in 1789. Mental deterioration. Maria's madness was first officially noticed in 1786, when she had to be carried back to her apartments in a state of delirium. Afterward, the Queen's mental state became increasingly worse. On May 25, 1786, her husband died. Maria was devastated and forbade any court entertainments. According to a contemporary account, state festivities began to resemble religious ceremonies. The Queen's eldest son and heir, Prince Dom José, died aged 27 from smallpox on September 11, 1788. And her confessor Inácio de São Caetano, titular Archbishop of Salonica, died in November that year. These deaths may have resulted in Queen Maria developing major depressive disorder. Another potential cause was her incestuous ancestry. This is substantiated by two of her sisters having had similar conditions. In February 1792, Maria was deemed insane and was treated by Francis Willis, the same physician who attended the British King George III. Willis wanted to take her to England, but the plan was refused by the Portuguese court. Potentially as a result of Willis' more advisory role in Maria's care, rather than the hands-on care of King George III, Willis deemed the Queen incurable. Maria's second son, Dom João, John, now Prince of Brazil, took over the government in her name, even though he only took the title of Prince Regent in 1799. When the Real Barraca de Ajuda burnt down in 1794, the court was forced to move to Caluche, where the ill queen would lie in her apartments all day. Visitors would complain of terrible screams that would echo throughout the palace. Transfer of the Portuguese court to Brazil. At the urging of the British government, the entire House of Braganza decided to flee on November 29, 1807 to establish a government in exile in the Portuguese Viceroyalty of Brazil. Along with the royal family, Maria was transported aboard the Carrack Principe Real. During her move from the royal palace to the docks, she was heard screaming throughout the trip, in the middle of the crowd and in the carriage. The Queen's dementia was so great that she feared that she was going to be tortured or robbed during her movement by her servants. The Portuguese royal court transferred from Lisbon to the Portuguese colony of Brazil in a strategic retreat of Queen Maria I of Portugal, Prince Regent John, the Braganza royal family, its court, and senior functionaries, totaling nearly 10,000 people, on November 27, 1807. The embarkment took place on the 27th, but due to weather conditions, the ships were only able to depart on the 29th of November. The Braganza royal family departed for Brazil just days before Napoleonic forces invaded Portugal on December 1, 1807. The Portuguese crown remained in Brazil from 1808 until the Liberal Revolution of 1820 led to the return of John VI of Portugal on April 26, 1821. For 13 years, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, functioned as the capital of the Kingdom of Portugal in what some historians call a metropolitan reversal, i.e., a colony exercising governance over the entirety of an empire. The period in which the court was located in Rio brought significant changes to the city and its residents, and can be interpreted through several perspectives. It had profound impacts on Brazilian society, economics, infrastructure, and politics. The transfer of the king and the royal court represented the first step toward Brazilian independence, since the king immediately opened the ports of Brazil to foreign shipping and turned the colonial capital into the seat of government. Maria lived in Brazil for a total of 8 years, always in a state of incapacitation. In 1816, she died at the Carmo convent in Rio de Janeiro at the age of 81. After her death, the Prince Regent was acclaimed as King Dom João VI. In 1821, Maria's body was returned to Lisbon to be interred in a mausoleum in the Estrela Basilica, which she had helped found. Maria I, a greatly admired figure in both Brazil and Portugal due to the tremendous changes and events that took place during her reign. In Portugal, she is celebrated as a strong female figure. Her legacy shines at Portugal's Caluche Palace, a Baroque Rococo masterpiece that she helped conceive. A large statue of her stands in front of the palace, and a posada near the palace is named in her honor. A large marble statue of the Queen was erected at the Portuguese National Library in Lisbon by the students of Joaquim Machado de Castro. In Brazil, Maria I admired as a key figure in the eventual independence of Brazil. It was during her reign, albeit through the government of her son's regency, that many of the national institutions and organizations in Brazil were created. These institutions were the precursors to their modern-day equivalents and granted large degree of power to the Brazilian colonials. While she is often called a louca, the mad, in Brazil, Brazilian and Portuguese historians hold her in high esteem. Thanks for watching HerStory channel. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe our channel.